Money never sleeps, pal.
Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This week, I'm welcoming back someone who now officially holds the all-time record for most guest appearances on the show, Ollie Walsh, co-founder and CEO of Pipit Global. Now, full disclosure, I've been on the board of Pipit since 2019, so I've had a front row seat to the remarkable and occasionally soul-scorching journey that Ollie's been on. But today's chat isn't just another update. This one's different. It's an exclusive first look at Pipit's acquisition by Qenta. Qenta is rethinking how money moves around the world, blending fintech, blockchain, and impact into one powerful payments platform.
Money never sleeps, pal.
In this episode, Ollie and I get into the weeds on what it really takes to build a startup with social impact at its core, what it feels like to finally get a deal across the line after years of trying, and how it all unfolds when you're leading with purpose rather than flash. We cover everything, from cash in, cash out points for the unbanked, to roller coasters on fire, to what it actually means to let go of your startup baby and become Mr. President. So let's dive right in with Ollie Walsh, all right here on Money Never Sleeps. So Ollie Walsh back for a record fourth time on Money Never Sleeps.
Number 4.
Welcome. Yeah. The Fantastic Four.
Awesome.
You remember who was in the Fantastic Four?
Oh, Mr. Fantastic, The Invisible Girl, Human Torch, and The Thing.
The Thing. Very good. All right. Anybody in this world that would be able to answer that question, it would be the former owner and operator of Needful Things in Galway back in the 90s, which is where we think we might have first, but not knowing who each other was at the time, where we probably would have seen each other back in the 90s when I was in Galway as a student, and you were in Galway as your first entrepreneurial venture.
Yeah, it was 30 years ago in December. We opened the doors, 8th of December, 1994.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
So that's my entrepreneurial journey up until the 16th of January this year.
Yeah, and you've been on quite a wild one. And so first off, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
This news that we are now sharing with the world. And we'll get into this in a minute. I know it's been quite a journey for you, and I've been pleased to be part of it with you. And let's give the listeners who may not have heard the first 3 episodes just a quick history of you and Pipit and what led you up to the point of this conversation that we're having today.
Okay, so I co-founded Pipit 12 years ago. Originally, the model was cash payments for e-commerce orders. So my friend Julian Callahan was the original ideas man and approached me about doing the research about this being a potentially good idea. The market being the unbanked or underbanked or security conscious who didn't want to use their cards or didn't have a card to use online. This is obviously 12 years ago, so payments has moved considerably since. I brought in another friend, Rory Ryan, as our CTO co-founder. We built a model basically locally on a laptop using a demo website to show how you could create an order on a website and then send a barcode to somebody's phone to pay that. We got that funded through Dublin Angels. We got more funding from a UK accelerator, Forge, a social impact tech and accelerator. Moved to England and then experienced the difficulty in being a migrant and the difficulty in getting a bank account in a new country. And that kind of led us to thinking about what else can we do with this platform we've created? How are migrants getting money home? And we realized the Western unions of the world were charging people 9.5% to send money back to Africa. And as a social impact company, which is where we came from, the idea was a social impact idea. We kind of aligned with our ethics and our mission that we could do something to help migrants to get money home cheaper and faster. So we built a model where I can't send you €100 to pick up locally, Western Union style, but I can lodge cash, physical cash, into an e-wallet and then transfer it. And the cost was 3.5% instead of 9.5%. We launched that model. Our first transaction was from the UK to Ghana, somebody loading an e-wallet. We connected with a lot of the big African networks, ZPay, Flutterwave, Salient, to be able to offer payouts or remittances on a B2B to C basis for their customers in Europe. And then we realized that we had a lot of potential connectivity with these companies, and these being the biggest financial institutions in Africa. So we integrated all their payments capabilities into our stack. And then we were able to offer European, Western, Asian companies payments in Africa. So that kind of evolved into what we call the bridge to Africa, that through our partners, we could offer payments, but we could also offer regulatory cover. We could offer licensing. It meant that our merchants didn't have to have an entity in any African country or a bank account. So we could completely de-risk them because we could also do the FX. We could collect Naira and CDs and shillings and settle it in USD or Euro. So we were able to de-risk Western companies from operating in Africa. We built up a big network, 50 countries across Africa, Latin America. We connected every bank account in Africa, every mobile money account, same for Latin America, alternative payment methods. And then we had physical cash as well across a lot of Western Africa, which led us to a kind of a point where our plan was always to get to a certain stage and then look for an acquirer for scaling. So we started that process 2019, I would say, 2020 maybe, slightly before COVID. So COVID complicated the process considerably. So we started looking for an acquirer and we eventually found Qenta, a Houston-based fintech company. So we were acquired by them in January of this year. So that's just been announced.
Congratulations on the deal. But things started to ramp up a bit, probably about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And tell us about the energy and momentum that you had to say, all right, listen, we've looked at a few deals, we've looked at a few opportunities here. What was the conversation that ultimately led to Pipit now being acquired by Qenta?
I think the first conversation we had with Brent de Jong is the founder and president of the group. We built a lot of capability. There was 5 on the team. At one stage there was 12, but we had to reduce down to 5. We built a network that I just outlined there with 5 people essentially and with about 2 million in investment. Which
that's a huge achievement.
For a US fintech, that was a shocking,
yeah,
a shocking outline. So he was just intrigued by how we had done this and how we'd managed to do it. And it was obviously a very good team, very focused team.
Does the social impact mission, does that mission-driven mind, did that allow you to do this with only 2 million in funding and 5 people?
It did, because, you start your founder's journey and, I mentioned those angels between them put in 125,000 euros, which at that point in your journey, you think is going to last you forever. And then fast forward a year or two and you're getting 750,000 and thinking this is only going to last 6 months. The funding is an ebb and flow process. It's not a constant up and up. So there was definitely lean times where the mission got us through. I think as well, the very first person that I pitched, the very first investor that I didn't know that I pitched Pipit to, and I told him we were social impact. He didn't invest, and his advice to me was never say that we're a social impact company. Based on that advice, I, going forward, led with the fact we're a social impact company in every investment conversation I've ever had. And the ones that immediately glaze over, you're wasting your time and you can wrap it up. And the ones that connect, okay, this person is aligned with us. And, when we're moved to England and doing that social impact accelerator, we were meeting the big English banks and we were talking about what we're trying to achieve. And they kind of put us into their, their CSR department and their marketing department, because for them, this was like publicity, PR, as opposed to something real. But when you started talking to the likes of Flutterwave and the big fintechs in Africa, they really bought into it because they know on the ground the differences that remittances make and the difference of a 9.5 or 3.5% fee can make to somebody in Ghana or in Sierra Leone or in Senegal receiving money from a family member in England. The difference for you and me is a cup of coffee or two. The difference in Sierra Leone, that's kind of 3 days' wages. So that social impact enabled us to get to the senior people in these big payment institutions and get deals signed, because we were very hearts on our sleeves that we're a win-win operation, that we didn't price our model slightly below the Western unions of the world. We did it as low as we possibly could to make as much impact as possible, with the model that the more merchants we got, the more consumers we got, the more transactions we got, the more revenue we made, but the more good we did at the same time.
And in those early conversations that you had with Qenta about putting a deal together, how much of a balance was there in their interest between social impact, that look what we've been able to build with a lean team, versus, hey, look at this great network that we've built, 50 countries around the world?
Both helped. What I think really helped from both sides in the conversation is that Qenta themselves did have a very strong social impact position. Group is a lot more outside of fintech. They align with UN Sustainable Development Goals in terms of employees and working in emerging markets. The group owns, responsible gold, which is a model that traces gold from the mine to the vault, ensuring that there's no child labor or there's no cyanide used or sulfur used in mining. They already had an impact position across the group. So our position and our model fit with them, which I think is why the conversation proceeded and myself and Brent clicked quite quickly in terms of what we were both trying to achieve.
The journey that you had been on with this deal, M&A is never a straight line, ever. What were some of the unexpected twists along the way that you can share?
Well, we made the decision, we being the board, to start looking for an acquirer. A lot of work went in, obviously, to doing pitch decks, acquisition decks, and then lining up potential buyers. And we worked with a US-based investment banker to help us source conversations. I had kind of thought that it was a 6 to 12-month process to get really dug in. It may or may not have been the COVID effect, but it took 18 months to get our first meaningful conversation. We had a term sheet from a Swiss fintech. We went through a 6-month process and got, I think, 8 days out from the signing date. And then that fintech lost their funding to acquirers. So 6 a.m. email, sorry about this, but effective immediately, this deal is pulled.
What went through your head?
Nothing that can be shared, I think, on a broadcast.
Earmuffs.
Yeah, but, it was a real sucker punch. I mean, I'd already really taken up my position in the new company. I'd already written a strategy document for the new company and how we would align with it. So it was very unexpected. And now the CEO of the company, it was as unexpected to him as it was to me, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. That was in November. It was kind of pretty close to Christmas. So we kind of regrouped over Christmas and then hit it again. After Christmas, we had 2 potential offers that following year, which would have been 23. We had 2 more deals potentially that fell apart relatively quickly. 24 was the conversation with Brent. So from deciding to sell the company to signing the deal was 4 years, with 3 deals falling through in that time frame.
The insanity of that is accentuated by the fact that I'm sitting here thinking that feels like, with everything that had gone on during that process, for me, obviously I'm a non-executive director on your board, and witnessing it and seeing it, that those 4 years to me have just been zunk encapsulated and accordion style. It just feels like there was so much activity there that how could that possibly have been that long ago? Unprecedented in terms of 3 deals out of 4 not getting over the line in a period of 4 years from the point in which you decide to sell the business.
It was a tough 4 years. And, and as a CEO, you need to run the company and you need to sign deals. And as a small team, you're reading contracts and you're doing compliance and you're doing the marketing and you're doing sales and you're doing events and you're doing podcasts and you're doing all sorts of stuff as your day job. But you're also selling the company is kind of 80% of your time. So you're trying to fit all the rest of it into 20%.
I talk to early stage founders, Ollie, about when you are raising money, that is basically 100% of your time for the CEO.
Yeah.
And that everything else just goes on top of that, if you can. And depending upon the size of your team, you may be able to spread that stuff out. If not, you wear it, right? So you definitely wore it for a very, very long time. When you think back to the early Pipit days, would you ever imagine that this is where you'd end up?
I founded Pipit when I was 40, and it was the start of what I'd set out as a 10-year personal strategy to establish a tech company and a social impact company and sell it by the time I was 50. That was the plan. I missed that deadline by 2 years, but I'm pretty happy with getting my 10-year plan done. There's 2 ways you can go, I think, with starting a tech company in Ireland. One is to do it on a more lean basis in Ireland, and the other one is to move to the States. And when I started this company, my son he wasn't born yet, actually. He was born the following year. But that's the founder journey. We got the funding on a Friday from the accelerator on the condition that I moved to Sheffield to do the accelerator. So I got the call on the Friday and I moved on the Monday. And my wife and then 11-month-old moved the following Monday. We spent 7 months living in Sheffield. I wasn't prepared to move to the States. I wasn't prepared to do that. That may be a younger man's game, a younger person's game. So it really was that we need to get this company to a certain size in terms of our technology and our capability, not in terms of revenue. We need to build something here that is worth buying for the stack, because we were never really funded enough for driving kind of real unicorn growth. We were funded enough to drive growth, to have revenue, to show this works, and to have, transactions every day in Nigeria and Mexico and Ghana and Kenya, and be able to say, here's a stack that it works. And interestingly, we had those 3 failed conversations and 1 successful one in terms of an offer, but we probably had 40, 50 conversations with potential buyers. Pretty much all of them said that to build what we would build would take 3 years and cost $10 million. They all said 3 years and they all said $10 million. We probably took longer, but we spent way less. But that was kind of how we positioned the value of what you're buying. So you weren't going buying billions in revenue, but you were buying something that was going to save you 3 years in time and 10 million in money to get there.
Just thinking back, that I've always looked at what you've built as being, when I've said this to people, you need to look at what Pipit has built here. Look at this network that they've built, and it's ready to go. It's the volume, and adding the volume into that from a global player is something that is going to drive tons of value, and not just tons of value for the shareholder, but tons of value for people on the ground, right? The people that are trying to send money back home cheaper and safer. And that's almost answering my next question, which is, what was the key thing that made Pipit acquirable beyond just having a good product and beyond having the social impact, mindedness, and mission?
Well, I think a part of that is from the seller's perspective, aligning with the buyer. I mentioned doing the acquisition deck. There's probably 50 of them in folders now, each one tweaked or significantly changed to align with the buyer and what their requirements are. So we were talking to companies in the US that had bought a UK-based remittance company. So we kind of aligned that to say, this is how we fit with what you've already bought, and this is how we can scale what you have together. So it's not a case of just firing out the same memo of understanding to everybody. It's a case of really aligning what you're selling with what the buyer needs.
And as you got deeper and deeper into this process, I know that you got closer and closer to Qenta, much like you did with the first one, the Swiss one, where, you said you basically wrote a strategy document for them, and then that deal failed. Now, this time around, you did more, and you got even closer.
Yeah.
And obviously it's been since January, and we're just announcing this now, but you kind of had to go into that with just, hey, listen, we're going to get this deal done. We're going to get it over the line. I'm going to go in and I'm going to start doing strategy.
Yep.
Right.
I am a relentless optimist. Which is both a good and bad thing.
Between those two, was there ever any kind of gut feeling like, here we go again, I'm going to go all in, but you know what? This one may not get over the line, but to hell with it.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. It is a roller coaster process. I'm kind of the startup guy. I'm a strategy guy. I'm a marketing guy background. Yep. When you start getting stuck into the legals of your company being acquired, it's an absolute nightmare. And then you just realize there's all these potential hurdles that you never thought of. So yeah, I went all in. It was the only way to do it, as far as I was concerned, is show them what you can do, really show them what you can do. So when these hurdles come, they don't want to just let it go because it's more hassle than it's worth. You're kind of proving, not just me individually, but the team as well, because we all got stuck into our various departments and meeting people and meeting teams and aligning strategies. And so everybody in there knew us. And when hurdles appeared, which it did multiple times, there was the will on both sides to find a solution.
And tell us now, 3 months on from closing the deal, 3 months plus, where is Pipit now situated within Qenta? How will the branding unfold? What will the presence of Pipit be within Qenta and within the market? How does that all fit together?
So the brand Pipit will be disappearing over the next couple of months. Within Qenta, they've kind of restructured around a few other acquisitions they made at the same time. So the group is now called the Q ecosystem, which includes also Qenta. So Qenta is the payments company. I got the job as the president of Qenta. It's been a US company. That's the title.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
Mr. President, yeah. And the rest of our team got VP roles. So VP of technology, of operations and product, of sales and partnerships, and of treasury and finance. So we've gone from, a team of 5, including me, to now leading a team of 35. Probably 25 of those are tech, mostly based in Pakistan. But there's 3 other business units in the ecosystem, which is Create, which is a regulated entity, QoS, which is our kind of in-house blockchain, which we're developing into an operating system for fintech, and QID, which is a ID verification and data tracking company. So not just ID for people, but ID for things, which is a very interesting model. So I have 3 other presidents to work with, and then the group CTO and the group head of accounts are part of this team, and then Brent as the big boss. So between those 4 companies, we've got 150 people, including shared resources in terms of compliance and legal and marketing and websites. We continue to be a payments company as Qenta. The 4 presidents are meeting next week in London for a kind of a QE strategy, where we'll be positioning Q ecosystem as we can do everything from onboarding your customer ID for verification, validation, to tracking logistics with our blockchain, to doing your payments in and payments out on a global basis. So moving to much bigger projects. And there's conversations going on at government levels for projects that we can provide.
Even though obviously I've known that all of this has been going on, just hearing you speak about it in a way that I know will be public is just gobsmacking to me. You're finally there.
Showing off your Irishness now.
You're finally there. That, becoming president of a division within a global fintech, the whole team taking on VP roles, being responsible now for strategy for a much larger team. All of this, and to know that the original Pipit vision is being carried forward into Qenta, and that you're championing that. Is it tough to let go of Pipit as an independent company?
No.
Why?
Well, like I said, the start is 30 years since I started this entrepreneurial journey. So Pipit's been the last 12 of it. Yeah, I've been 30 years self-employed. I've been 30 years dragging businesses along behind me. And,
yeah.
They're hard yards being self-employed. And when you get into, a lot of those years were consulting years. I'm not sure I would consider consulting to be entrepreneurial. It's service provision really, but it's self-employed. There was many hard years. There was more hard than easy years in Pipit. So I'm satisfied where we've gotten it to as a company. And I'm also very satisfied as personally on that entrepreneurial journey that I've, closed that loop and gone from an idea and startup through to growing it, scaling it, funding it, and selling it. It's a loop that not many people get to close.
No, it's not. So just hearing you say that, Ollie, makes me think of an email that went out after the deal had closed to shareholders. And there was a list of bullet points there that sent chills down my spine when I read it. And what you're talking about here on being on that journey really was reflected in this very quick list. And do you mind if I read these bullet points from that email?
Sure, yeah.
So what was said in the shareholder letter that you wrote was that it's been quite the journey for us, the full range of the startup world, the original idea, researching markets, developing strategies, building tech, building the team, sourcing funding from angels, VCs, and crowdfunding, going to market, onboarding merchants and collections partners, our first transaction, then our second, traveling to exotic destinations, traveling to boring destinations, recruiting staff, having to let staff go, needing to raise more money, having good days, and having bad ones. That was poetic.
That's one thing I've ever been accused of before as being a poet.
That is like the founder's poem right there. Okay, the founder's journey poem. Will you be doing more writing?
I'm trying to develop a more ongoing blog habit. I mean, my own website, olliewalsh.com, has probably 20 blogs on it over the space of the last 4 years. I've been trying to get into a more weekly flow of doing blogs. I used to do a lot more blogs when I used to do more traveling. I found that kind of having 2 hours in a train was time to write a blog, whereas I'm not doing much traveling now. But yes, I do like writing, so I do plan to do more.
Yeah, it can be quite therapeutic. What are some of the most important lessons that you've taken from this chapter or this book that you wish you could kind of send back to 2015 Ollie?
There's a lot of things that you don't realize on the way there are going to be problems in the future. I think funding is a big one of those. When you're in the startup world, at the beginning, you don't really think of things like cap tables being a problem in the future. We had some significant angels. We did around 2017, 2018, which is where Westloop Ventures came in and Enterprise Ireland. We had some people who wanted to invest relatively small amounts of money in that round. Relatively small as in, between 1,500 and 5,000 euros. And they become kind of names on the cap table, and your cap table starts getting longer. And when you're at that stage, that money is really useful. But it becomes a problem when you start dealing with legal people in a fintech institution that are like, why is there so many people on your cap table? We also did a crowdfunding round, which is in that list there. That became really problematic. I certainly wouldn't recommend crowdfunding for anybody in the so well and good if you're doing a BrewDog kind of style where you put in $20 and you get a t-shirt. But if you're people who are getting kind of a nominee structure in your company, it becomes very difficult then when you're trying to unwind that. So that's certainly something I wouldn't do again.
And you can't solve that with a free pint of beer.
No. And you can't solve it with drinking the beer yourself either. It needs to be faced up on.
Only makes it worse.
Yeah. So, but you kind of along the way you meet people that excel and you meet people that really let you down, and it's difficult not to take it kind of personally a lot of the time. So what I always say when I'm talking to people myself, it is a roller coaster, ups and downs, and you need personally as an individual to stay centered. And as that goes up and down, you're doing a straight line and not get too carried away by the successes and not get too down by the failures or the problems. And as a CEO, you should always have like support structures out there. I had a particularly good board who were, including yourself, who were supportive all the time. I'm a member of a kind of leadership group called Power 7, which is a Barry Walsh runs us, no relation Barry Walsh, but it's a nationwide peer leadership group for business owners in batches of 7, where you can kind of go for a day every second month and just support other people to get your problems off your chest. I had kind of 3 friends in particular that I'd spent a lot of time with, just like structured, planned time, that I'm just coming here to meet you for coffee to rant for half an hour because there's some stuff to get off my chest. And 2 of our investors were also in that list, and my wife as well, which is debatable for a lot of people. For me, it's my wife was crucial in keeping me on the straight and narrow, but for a lot of people, they like to keep the business world away from home, which I know can accentuate the problem as opposed to solve it. But you need an extensive list of close contacts that can support you through the process, because you can't always go through the problems with your team because a lot of the problems are your own.
Yeah, I found in all of this, having a supportive spouse is absolutely essential. Yeah. And what I've also found is having kids, you want them to be proud of you. You want to be proud of what you've built and proud of what you do. Do you ever have any of that element in what drove you?
Yeah, my son's 11 now. He recently asked me, can he start working in Pipit? So he now does my computer updates every Friday afternoon, and he charges me €7. So he's part of the team.
When you think about where you sit now, what does this acquisition mean for the people that Pipit was originally built to serve, the unbanked and underserved globally?
Oh, it means we can really scale those benefits. I think the velocity of the company is definitely limited by the size of the team. There's only so many contracts you can read at the same time. We've 5 at the moment that we've gotten in the last, for this month, we've got 5 new contracts being reviewed now by our legal and compliance team, as opposed to by me and Tricia, who's our head of operations. So we can really accelerate what we're doing as part of a group. We've a lot more heft, for want of a better word, that, we can go and talk to bigger institutions. And when they do their due diligence, we're not a 5-person team in the west of Ireland. We're part of a global fintech organization, and it's a meaningful entity that bigger institutions don't have to be concerned about dealing with. We have a much more global reach now in terms of the senior people through the Q ecosystem are kind of spread geographically quite wide. People coming from different backgrounds. We have a lot more reach into different networks. So, networking is really part of how we prove this business. So we can see that expanding quite a lot.
Excellent. Big opportunities other than that for Pipit as part of Qenta?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. People first, geography second is kind of their mantra in terms of their team. So there's a lot of opportunities for growth for all the team. We're startup world-wise, we're quite mature for a team. There's still ways to go for us, yes, career-wise. So there's, I think, big opportunities. There's a lot for us as individuals, learning and growth. And for me, it's my first time having a job where I'm not the CEO. It's my first time having a job where I'm not responsible for making enough money this month to pay my own wages.
No, it's nuts. Getting a bit more insightful into all of this, and you've been very insightful in this conversation, Ollie, so thank you. But if the first 10 years of Pipit were a book, what would you call it?
Probably Rollercoaster on Fire or something like that.
And hair on fire.
Yeah.
The roller coaster on fire.
Roller coaster on fire. We had a part of our, part of that group Power 7 piece. We do like a retreat every year, and Barry's very good at kind of exercises, like leadership exercises. We have to draw where you are in life. Last year, what I drew was a roller coaster on fire.
Okay. So, there you go.
That'll be a good title for the book.
There you go. Yeah, and what you're talking about with Barry and the power of 7, it feels like Founders Anonymous.
Yeah, well, you've 7 founders in a room, and that we're quite different businesses, but essentially we all have the same problems. The power of 7 is it's self, family, and business in that order is how things are structured. So it's not like Enterprise Ireland do a similar thing called the Founders Forum, which I think Barry might have been behind actually setting it up, but it's purely business. You have to look after yourself first, and then your family, and then you can take care of your business. So 7 founders, we all have the same business problems, and we all have the same life problems. So like I said, those support structures are important.
You having the opportunity to do this while going through this Pipit journey of the roller coaster on fire. I'm glad you had that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh,
I'm
it
glad
was
you had that.
absolutely invaluable.
If you were to think, well, maybe a bit early to ask you this, but can you name book 2 now that you're part of the Qenta family? Could you actually give book 2 a name yet?
Wow. Something like the future's bright sounds really cliche, but it's a new dawn. It's a new dawn, new day. Yeah, I kind of, like I said, it was a 10-year plan that took 12 years to complete, but I haven't started. I'm not sure if we're going to do a 10-year. I might do an 8-year to up to 60 plan, but I haven't started that yet. I'm just kind of settling into my new role, really.
I heard the redemptive sigh of relief there and the optimistic smile there for a minute there, Ollie. So it seems like you're in the right place.
Yeah. A friend of mine that sold his business a few years ago said it doesn't really settle in for 3 months. He said it's 3 paychecks. Your first paycheck, great. This is my first actual paycheck. Second one, oh, brilliant. This happens every month. And the third one's like, oh. So I'm on 4.
Yeah. Yeah. You've been on the show now, 3 times before this, and I may or may not have asked you this question each time. I know I did ask you at least once, perhaps twice, but this is the last question that we ask everybody on this podcast, which is, what is something that people would not expect to know about you? And in your case, this will be one more thing that people wouldn't expect to know about you.
Giving away a lot of secrets on the show.
You have.
Yeah. The first time you asked me that, I think the answer was about my Tai Chi practice.
Yep.
Which at the time was very much a physical practice, going to Tai Chi classes. But over the last 2 or 3 years, I've gotten very much into the philosophy behind it as well, and Taoism, and reading a lot around Taoist philosophy. And that is really aligned with my mindsets, but aligned with the requirements of being a founder and being on that roller coaster on fire of aligning with the universe and its energy. You can't fight. You can't swim against the current. You need to find a way to swim with the current. So that's been taking up a lot of my spare time recently, is really getting deep into the study of that.
Where does that intersect with Zen?
Zen comes from when the Indian Buddhists moved east into China, and they kind of interacted with Taoists. The original Taoist philosophy didn't have anything like Buddhists or temples. When the Taoists and the Buddhists met, that kind of became Chinese Buddhism, which then developed Zen from there. So it's kind of part of Chinese Buddhism.
There's some roots there, and I found a lot of that calming for me, and the whole way that I got into that was just reading one of Phil Jackson's books, the famous former coach of the Chicago Bulls and Los Angeles Lakers with Michael Jordan and then Kobe Bryant. May he rest in peace. You being obviously a huge student of this and being totally immersed in that has had a fantastic, almost necessary impact on how you keep sane in that roller coaster on fire. But I definitely have started to dig into that a little bit. And the one thing that I've gotten out of it is that there are things you can control and there are things that you can't control. And there will be times where you feel a certain emotion that can be all encompassing. And you kind of just have to sit back and think, why am I actually feeling that? And what does it actually mean? And then put it where it needs to be and get on with things.
Yep.
And I feel like that's Ollie Walsh in a nutshell.
You just cannot waste energy on something you can't control. And so many people do. So Tai Chi is the physical manifestation of Taoism, is the way they put it. So I kind of started with the physical manifestation and worked my way backwards into philosophy.
And that versus startup life, roller coaster on fire, night and day.
Yep.
What is the best way for people to get in touch with you and learn more about Qenta?
Well, you can get in touch with me on LinkedIn is probably the best way. Ollie Walsh, but ollie.walsh@qenta.com is my new email address.
Fantastic. And then it's QENTA.com for Qenta?
Correct. Yep.
Fantastic. Well, listen, Ollie, thank you for coming out to the show to tell the story. And thank you for keeping me on board with you since 2019. And I know that this... Thank you.
You were part of the aforementioned support mechanism.
Absolutely. Doing my best. And that I think this journey, book 2 is not written yet. I think there's some thoughts and ideas on how that might all unfold. And anything that will come in the future between you and me will be completely agnostic to any of this, because it's been such a pleasure being on this journey with you. And I can't wait to see how this all plays out.
Super.
Thanks, Ollie.
Thanks, Pete.
That does it for this week, folks. Thanks to Ollie for opening up his mind one more time to help us figure out why he does what he does. Check out the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie for all the relevant links to learn more about Ollie and Qenta. If you like what you heard, please leave us a rating and or review on Spotify, Apple, or on moneyneversleeps.ie/rate. Thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to work with on your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early stage startup investor in the next version of the internet, and I lead the Techstars Web3 Accelerator. There are plenty of links in the show notes on moneyneversleeps.ie on how to get in touch, so don't hesitate to reach out. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!